All right, welcome everybody to problem set number 4, examples. So these examples are going to be actually very close to problem set number 4 since we're not actually there in person and I'm not able to help you out in person. So to begin with, the sales of this restaurant fluctuate much like a sine or cosine function. The first of the month, they've got 120 sales per day. It's a pretty small restaurant. The middle of the month, sales are down to 40. The implication is the first of the next month, they're going to go back up and then back down, back up, back down, etc. So find the function that does the sine or cosine because it's not tangent. First, I'm going to draw a little picture of what's going on. So this could be the timeline starting from 0 and then it says a month. And I suppose that you could just use 1 for a month, but I'm just going to say, well, it's an average month that's got 30 days. And at the beginning of the month, they're going to be at the top, 120. By the middle of the month, they're going to be down the lowest, which is 40. And so basically it's saying it looks like this. So it fluctuates. By the middle of the month, it gets to the lowest, and then it's going to go back up. So that looks like cosine. Before I can write the function, I need to know what's in the middle of a 120 and a 40. So you could add those two together, which is 160, and then divide by 2 is 80. Or in other words, from the middle, it goes up by 40. From the middle, it goes down by 40. So that means that the amplitude is 40. And then this number right here in the middle, that's actually the vertical shift. So I'm just going to abbreviate that real quick. The vertical shift is 80. So this information over here is going to be the y information. And then for the x information, all we have is that the period is equal to 30 days. So I've got the x information, like I usually separate it, the y information, keep them separate. So the period is equal to 30. And the formula for period is 2 pi divided by b. So 2 pi divided by b equals 30. And then with this equation, what I could do is multiply both sides by b. So then I would say 2 pi equals 30 times b. And then to solve for b, divide both sides by this 30 right here. So that means this side is going to have 2 pi divided by 30. And then that could be reduced. It's pi over 15. And with the y information, I actually don't need to do any work, although I usually put the amplitude first and then the vertical shift second. Because when I go to write the equation, I'm going to use this first and use this second. Okay, then this looks like cosine. So I'm thinking it's y equals, the amplitude goes in front, and then it's going to be cosine, and then in the parentheses is going to be the b times x. And this one does not have any horizontal shift. So like if it said that it starts on the 5th day of the month, then there would be a horizontal shift. But this one, it's just starting at 0, so no horizontal shift. So that means this part's done. And then last is plus 80. So that's the function that models the situation. And now we're going to move on to a couple of different parts. Like for part B, use that equation. And for part B, what are the sales on the 23rd of the month? So let me just recopy. The function is 40 times cosine. This is the pi over 15. X is the days, and then plus 80. So for this one, we just need to substitute a 23 in for X. And at that point, just type it into the calculator. Let me just go back to the graph real quick. So this would be the 15th of the month. The 23rd would be right about here. So we should get something that is somewhere between 40 and 80. Let's see how my prediction works out. So because of the pi, we need to be using radians, so it is in radians. And then 40 cosine, pi divided by 15 gets multiplied with 23, and then plus 80. And it's close to what I predicted, but my graph wasn't exactly accurate. To be more accurate, it's going to be 84.181, or since these are sales at a restaurant, it's not talking about dollars, it's talking about how many dinners did they sell. So 84 actual sales. Okay, part B is done. And now on to part C. So find 2 days when the sales are going to be 100. So just real quickly, the graph went like this. This is up to the 30th day from 0 to 30. Down here at the bottom was 40. Up here at the top is 120. So now this question is saying is, if you have a line right here where sales are 100 and you go across, there's actually going to be 2 days when they have 100 for their sales. What are those 2 days? Well, sales are 100. The sales are actually the y value. So this is actually saying use y equals 100. So the function that we had was 40 cosine pi over 15x plus 80. And then when does that equal 100? So first we need to do some algebra, like eliminate this plus 80 by subtracting 80 from both sides. And this will be 20 on the left side. The next thing to do is remove this 40 right here by dividing. And just so happens that on the left side it could be reduced. 20 divided by 40 is 1/2. Not that I really need to reduce it, because the next step is I'm going to be doing cosine inverse anyway. So now take cosine inverse of both sides. On the right side, all that's left is pi over 15 times x. And then cosine inverse of 1/2. So that equals 1.047. 1.047. And then the last step, to solve for the x over here, you could use the reciprocal, multiply by 15 over pi, and then this one also multiply by 15 over pi. So then these cancel, these cancel. Now we have our first solution. X equals, so 15 divided by pi times the 1.047. That looks like the 5th day, 4.999. I'm going with the 5th day. Okay, so that means that right here, this is the 5th day. Now, I'm going to actually use trigonometry to find the other answer, but it seems to me that this right here should be the 25th day, because if this is over by 5, this should be over by 5, but since it's to the left of 30, that should be 25. But let's see if it's true. So for that basically goes back to this step right here. And if you use a smart trig class, this is saying that cosine is equal to a positive. So of course that could happen right here, which is the first answer we got. And then that could also happen right here in the 4th quadrant. So to get to the 4th quadrant, start here, go around almost 2 pi, and then stop right here. So previously we had gotten 1.047, that's the answer in the 1st quadrant. For the answer in the 4th quadrant, it's going to be 2 pi. So that would be if we went all the way around the circle as 2 pi, but it's a little bit smaller than that by 1.047. So subtract that. So 2 pi minus 1.047 of 5.236. And then that 5.236 would go right here. 5.236. So when you put a 5.236 right here, it still needs to be multiplied by pi over 15. So another answer would be, you have to multiply the red part, 15 over pi. And then I'm excited to see if my prediction is right, because I said that was going to be a 25. Let's see. So 15 divided by pi gets multiplied with 5.236. Oh, on the money. Woo, time to go to Vegas. X is equal to, so that is the 25th day of the month. So there's the answer, that it's those 2 days. Okay, if you're looking at problem set number 4, these were examples for the first page and then for the second page. So with this one, you're actually already given the function and then do things like we just did. So for this bike company, this is the function. So this plus 600 right here can be written at the beginning or it could be written at the end. Because it's adding 600, you could do it at the beginning or the end, either way. Okay, so that's the situation. The sales for this company over a year, and t equals 0 means the very beginning of the year, January 1st. And then, first question. When are the sales the lowest? So you could go through, write down the X information, the Y information, the period, the amplitude, the vertical shift, etc. You could also do it a simpler way by just looking at the graph of sine. So the graph of sine, and I'm not graphing the bike sales, I'm just looking at, just because that says sine, then I'm looking at the graph of sine. Right here would be 2 pi, because that's one full cycle. Right here would be pi, that's in the middle. And right here is where they're the lowest. So that would be when x is equal to 3 pi over 2. Well, in this situation, we don't just have x, but we have all of this. So when all of this is equal to 3 pi over 2, that's when their sine graph is going to be at the lowest. So when pi over 4 t plus 4 becomes equal to 3 pi over 2, that's when their sine graph is going to be the lowest. And then do a couple steps of algebra. Subtract 4 from both sides. And when you have things like this, don't type this into the calculator right now. Just wait until the end and type the whole thing in at once. That is much more accurate. So again, multiply by the reciprocal, multiply by the reciprocal, and then these cancel. So we just get t equals, and then how much is that? So we've got parentheses, 3 pi divided by 2 minus a 4 gets multiplied with 4 divided by pi, and that would equal 0.907. Now I want to see if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is graph the function. 600 plus 150 sine of pi over 4 x plus 4. It's over a year, and because this is months, that means t is months. So for the window, I would need to go from 0 to 12 months. When you add these two numbers, so if you just ignore the sign part, when you add these two numbers, that's the biggest it's going to get, and when you subtract them, that's the smallest. So 600 minus 150 is the minimum, and 600 plus 150 will be the maximum. And so this is what the graph looks like. When are the sales the lowest? So we got this answer right here. Right there. So let me test that theory. We got 0.907. So this is basically saying 0 represents January 1st. This isn't even one full month. That means they're still in January. So actually, if you take 0.907, January has 31 days. So that represents January 28th. Now, if you look at the graph, there's another time over here. So if you need another solution, then you would draw another cycle of sine. And then to get from here to here, that is a length of 2 pi. So add 2 pi. So for the other solution, it's going to be 3 pi over 2 plus 2 pi. And then get a common denominator. So this would be 4 pi over 2 plus 3 more, so that's 7 pi over 2. And then we would put that number right here. We would do the same algebra, which means that we would get that this is 7 pi over 2, and then the rest of it's the same. So another solution is put parentheses 7 pi over 2 minus a 4, and then times 4 over pi. And how much is that? So actually I can just go back right here, get this one back, and all I need to do is change this to 7 pi over 2. So 8.907. So the 8th month. Well, we're using that 0 is January, which means if it's a 1 or a 1 point something, that's February. 2 would be March. 3 would be April. 4 would be May. 5, June. So usually we call 6 June, but with this numbering system, actually 5 would be June, and then 6 would be July, 7 would be August, and 8 would be September. So this means September, and it's got the same decimal, So it's going to give us September 28th. Then before I leave this page right here, I want to go back to the graph and see if this 8.907 is correct. That should be this lowest point right here. So trace 8.907, and that should be the lowest point. Excellent. I don't know if you can see it, but the little cursor is right there. Blink, 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 blink. Okay, using this same function, we're moving on to part B. For part B, find the period. So the function was sales equals 600 plus 150 sine pi over 4t plus 4. So period comes from the formula 2 pi divided by b. And then the b is the number sitting in front of t, although I should factor it first of all. So this part can stay the same, but then I need to factor out pi over 4. And then it leaves t plus what? So this right here doesn't actually have a pi over 4 in it. So what you got to do is divide pi over 4. So divide this by pi over 4, and it leaves just a 1. Then divide this by pi over 4. So if you have a 4 and you're dividing by pi over 4, that means use a 4 and then multiply by the reciprocal, 4 over pi. So that's going to leave 16 over pi. And you can always check and make sure that I did that right, because if you distribute this to this, yep, it equals that. And if you distribute this to this, the pi's will cancel. The 4 divides into the 16 4 times, so that part's done correctly. So this is the b. And so period is 2 pi divided by b. And then we're dividing by a fraction, so that's going to be 2 pi times the reciprocal. And with this, the pi's will cancel, so it's just 8. The period is 8. And because this was in months, this is in months. So their business is cyclical over an 8-month period. And then on to the last question, part C. What are the average sales? So average, well, for one thing, if you have a list of numbers, you could add them up and divide by however many numbers you have, and that's the average. Average also means middle. So what's in the middle? So the function was 600 plus 150 sine blah, blah, blah. Because this part, I don't need to answer this question. This part was for the period. This is about the sales, so that's about what S equals. And S equals, basically, it's going to range between, so when you add these two, that's the biggest it's going to get, 750. And when you subtract these two, that's the smallest it's going to get. And it's going to be this 600 that's in the middle. And then it'll go up to 750. From 600, it'll go down by 150 to 450. And then since it's the sine function, it's basically going up and down like this. So this isn't the exact graph, but it's good enough to understand what's going on. So the graph is like this. The idea of the average is it's supposed to be in the middle. Well, that red line is in the middle, because half of the time they're above average and half of the time they're below average. So that means this number right here, that's the average. So that one didn't take much work. The average is equal to 600 sales. Since it's a bike company, I assume those are bicycles, but perhaps it's parts or something else. All right, anyway, have fun with problem set number 4. Please email me if you have questions and or stop by my office hours, which are going to be online. Look for the link on Canvas.